Before we go on with what I hope will be well, actually, I know will be another excellent panel, but I would like to take a moment to introduce my colleague, Minoli Ratnatunga, who is the lead author on our biannual State Technology and Science Index. And you may wonder, what does this index have to do with you? And I would say everything, because we conceived the index well more than a decade ago, originally to look at California's situation in terms of not only innovation, but in particular its workforce and how ready and adaptable California was at the time and how much other states in the country are to future jobs, what we're doing not only in terms of entrepreneurship, creating those jobs, the overall environment for those jobs, for the innovation, but in particular also how ready is the workforce and what's the pipeline of human capital to be able to adapt. So Minoli is going to give you some a preview of the index, which is in fact going to be coming out in just a few weeks, and I would like to turn things over to her.
Thank you, Kevin. So here at the Milken Institute Center for Regional Economics, we're very interested in knowledge-based economic development, and we designed the State Technology and Science Index to capture the various steps of the innovation economy. So we move from investment in research to the discovery of new ideas, investment in those ideas, and then the success of resulting firms. And we also look at education, so state investment in higher education. We're interested in STEM graduates, and then what does the science and technology workforce look like? The overall State Tech and Science is made up of 5 sub-indices that capture these various steps within the innovation economy, and I'm going to share this preview with you. But the results of the State Tech and Science Index are pretty stable, so we're more interested in what the results tell us than the index rankings themselves. Thank you. So overall, California ranks 4th on our 2018 index. This is the same position that it had in 2016. And the top 4 is actually unchanged. You have California ranking behind Massachusetts, Colorado, and Maryland. And so this is the first sub-index that we look at. It's the research and development inputs, which looks at university and private sector investment in R&D. And you see the same 4 states here in the top 4. But Massachusetts is number 1 by a wide margin. It's in the top tier for research across a range of STEM fields, and its biotech cluster invests heavily in private sector R&D. We look at risk capital and the entrepreneurial infrastructure that exists. This addresses things like patents filed, incubators, and VC investment. You can see that Massachusetts is number 1 again, thanks to its recent success in attracting venture capital. But California has been number 1 on this index in the past. It was in 2016, and we think that it has the potential to be number 1 again on the index in the next edition. And for example, we looked in 2017 at the universities that were the best at technology transfer and commercialization. And you can see California does relatively well here. In fact, we had 5 universities in the top 30, and California excels at both ends of the commercialization process. So you have Caltech in Pasadena ranking number 1 for patents, and you have UCLA ranking number 1 for the startup life cycle. So we're investing and we're producing companies out of our innovation. And you can see this effect in the private sector. California ranks number 2 on our Tech Concentration and Dynamism Index, which looks at the vibrancy of the state's tech sector. Unsurprising if you think about the number of clusters that we have here in California. And the high-tech sector has created high-quality jobs across the U.S. economy. You can see this in this chart. The blue bars represent the total pace of job creation in the national economy. The orange bars are the high-tech sector. They're pretty much on pace. But if you compare the wage growth, which is the line there, you can see the orange line for high-tech jobs are creating much more in terms of wage growth. So that's where the high quality jobs have been created, but we're not training enough Californians for these jobs. If you look at our Human Capital Investment Index, which assesses STEM graduates and higher education investments, you can see that California ranks 10th, well below our competitors. So the states that ranked in the top 3 overall, they're in the top 3 here, but we're far behind them. But if you look at our workforce, we're actually not that far behind. So we're luring in state science and technology workers. And that really highlights the opportunity gap here in California. We're creating these high skills jobs, but we aren't training enough Californians for them. And so we're hiring in folks from elsewhere. In this chart, you can see that people with less than a bachelor's degree have been moving out of California. This is the sort of difference between people moving in and people moving out. And in the last 2 years, people with graduate degrees or professional degrees were the only educational group who moved to California. Otherwise, we've been losing population. And so why is this happening? Partly it's about the types of employment opportunities that exist here in California, and partly it's about what it costs to live here. Who can afford to live here and pay for housing and pay for transportation if they don't have access to a high-paying job? And what are the qualifications that you need to be able to afford a lifestyle here? And then it's also what are the quality of life and quality of opportunity that's being created in other states that is luring people away. So in our report, we have a number of recommendations that are for states across the country, and some of these are being addressed here in California already. We think we should lower the cost of STEM education. We should be aligning curricula between the community colleges and four-year colleges to facilitate transfers. We should ease the transition between education and the workforce, and partnerships between educators and the private sector are crucial to this. And other states may want to address their non-compete laws to try and match California's flexibility with regards to employee mobility, so job switching and whether you're allowed to go work for the competitors. Overall, we think that a good innovation economy can adapt to change, and part of that is providing lifelong opportunities for training and making sure that we have the right priorities for training by making sure we have partnerships between the private sector and educators. We think we need to educate more people locally to participate in the knowledge-based economy and create pathways to high-skill jobs with an eye on what's coming next. And we also need to recognize and address some of the challenges that we have here in terms of housing costs, transportation costs, so that we have less of our skilled labor leaving the state. Overall, we have really strong assets here in California, and the challenge is how do we take our strong regional communities and economies, our research institutions, our private sector, and our workforce, and transform them into future growth? And I think Kevin and the panel will be discussing some of that, and I hope that they have some good suggestions for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manoli. And now I'm going to take the opportunity to relatively briefly introduce the distinguished panelists I have up here with me, who will be the individuals giving you the insights in particular on the, as we call it, the shaping the workforce of the future academia and employer partnerships. And particularly, I will note the fact that the individuals we have up here all are incredibly well positioned to give those insights. Immediately to my left, your right, we have Eloy Ortiz Oakley, who is the Chancellor of the California Community College District, who has a rather distinguished resume and a great deal of perspectives. He may be a Sacramento resident, but he was a longtime Southern Californian. He was the head of the Long Beach Community College District. He, in fact, went to school down here after a 4-year stint in the Army, so he can talk about the veteran's perspective as well as the perspective of Southern California, the perspective of Sacramento, and numerous other insights. Immediately to his left, your right, is Dr. Soraya M. Coley, who is the president of Cal Poly Pomona. And if you are not familiar with Cal Poly Pomona and the Cal Polys in general, you should be. In fact, they are they are the experts at educating people at a 4-year school. They are part of the Cal State system, but they have the best job placement rate of any public university in the state. And this is something that's incredibly important. And she has, even though she's down here in Southern California, she was provost at Cal State Bakersfield, so she knows the Central Valley, and she has a rather effective background that she can go into with a number of different perspectives as well. And to her left, farthest right for the rest of you, is Jay Banfield, who is Chief Operating Officer, he's Chief Operating Officer at Year Up, where he is particularly focused on partnering with firms such as LinkedIn, JP Morgan Chase, we have no idea who they are at this point, and Salesforce to develop talent from within urban communities. And he's a social entrepreneur, but he has perspectives from both the public and private sector, which are important. He worked at Oracle. He in fact worked as assistant treasurer for the city and county of San Francisco and assistant general manager at the Public Utilities Commission. So he's got the perspectives to round things out. And between the three of them, we'll hopefully have a number of answers to key questions. As has been noted, we are living in a time of high housing costs and in particular, high student debt. Right now, the ability to translate an education into a way that pays for itself, that pays for the future, is significant. We can see the changes in lifestyle that have happened, in part because of the cost of living in the state, in part because of the high debt and burden that students come out with. Students wait longer not only to get married and have kids, they wait longer to buy houses if they can afford them, they wait longer to buy cars. Their overall dynamic is shifting. And how we get through the educational system and how we link education to actual jobs and educating students on that pathway, not just in college, but even earlier, so that they have hope and they have a path, is incredibly significant. And we'll be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about the fact that, was mentioned earlier, the challenges of automation and the challenges of changing technological needs. So right now, what I'd like to start off with is a question for each of the panelists, is that what are the greatest challenges and greatest successes you've had in engaging with employers about the programs that you have and getting them to buy in? So Eli, we want to go ahead.
Sure. Well, I'll begin with the greatest challenges. The greatest challenges is a growing disconnect between employers and I'll just speak for the community colleges, our education institutions. There is a drive toward automation and the application of artificial intelligence in the workforce. The skills are consistently changing and adapting in the workforce, and there is very little communication happening between the employers, this innovation, and the way that we are training workforce. That's not true across the board. There's certainly some instances where our community colleges are working very closely with employers. There was recent announcement, Amazon's working with a number of community colleges here in the LA area, but that is lagging. So those are some of the greatest challenges we're facing. We have students in our pipeline, and if you think about the impact that we have in California, 1 out of every 4 community college students in the nation is a California community college student. We are huge. We have large scale, but that communication link is not very robust right now, and so it's taking us way too much time to get students ready for the jobs that are being created, let alone the jobs that are being created over the next couple of years. The successes that we're having is, we recently launched the California's 115th community college, which is fully online, competency-based, strictly focused on adult learners, incumbent workers in the workforce. And so we've had partnerships with Dignity Health, Walmart, a number of other employers, Salesforce, Autodesk, where we are going to change the value proposition. We're actually putting the hiring manager at the heart of the design of the online college, with the real proposition of ensuring that there is a clear link between the skills that are being taught in this competency-based online college and the jobs that are out there, so that there is a clear link, that there is involvement from the beginning, not just from the employer, but also in many cases the labor organizations that represent the millions of Californians that have no more than a high school credential. And so those are the successes we are beginning to have, and we're looking forward to where that's going to take us.
Great.
Well, I will just say that, first of all, as a polytechnic university, we have a deep commitment to making sure that our students have the depth of knowledge and conceptual understanding, but they are expected to apply their learning during their time at Cal Poly Pomona. And we are able to achieve this in a couple of ways. First of all, you may or may not know that our largest college is engineering. 1 in every 14 engineers in California is a Cal Poly Pomona graduate. And we've been very intentional about connecting our programs with opportunities with industry, and we do it a number of ways. First, we have board of advisors for 6 out of our 8 colleges, and these board members are in fact very much tied to the work that we are doing within Cal Poly Pomona. And so there's this open system of dialogue and exchange. The second thing that we are very proud of is certainly the internships, the expectations, again, that students will be able to apply this knowledge and be able to test out ideas. And so we have been focused on expanding this. As part of our overall strategic plan and our academic master plan, we are launching an initiative called the Future of Work in Human and Civic Engagement. And that is very intentional about not preparing our students for a particular job, because if we look at the forecast, on average, by the time the students who graduate this year, they will have 12 to 15 job changes before they retire. So we're more focused on what are the competencies, the knowledge base, the experiences that our students need to have, and how do we help them think about adaptive strategies? How do we help them engage in what is going to be the economy of change and disruption? And so the internships become very important. The third way in which we are connecting students with what is happening beyond our campus borders is that we have industries, organizations that are actually coming on campus and using our students' knowledge and working with the research of our faculty such that we are doing spin-offs for various products. For example, NASA is working with us so that we take NASA technologies and our students look at these in the context of how can these technologies now be made available for the general public? How do we adapt NASA technology in order to make this something that is both marketable and useful for the general public? And so in many ways, we find that the nature of the learning, the pedagogy at Cal Poly Pomona is tied to the students' ability to be creative. We say that we're the epicenter for creativity, discovery, and innovation. And we're very unapologetic about our role. We are very clear that not only is it important for students to work in disciplinary ways, but we are also intentional about creating interdisciplinary experiences. So you may have a history major working with an engineering major, working with a major in art, because we know that the nature of jobs in the future is going to create complex, multidisciplinary perspectives for solving.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I think the biggest challenge that we face, and Ela and I were on a panel not too long ago, and I think we both agreed, is how do we move beyond partnerships to true integration between the private sector and academia? And I'll give you an anecdote. I was sitting with a senior executive from one of the firms we partner with who wanted to develop some cybersecurity training. And this person said, look, I really would love to work with a community college in the area, but I don't know where to go. I don't know if I'm supposed to go to the president, to the chancellor, to the dean, I go to an individual instructor. So I'm not sure what to do, Jay. And I smiled and I said, you know, do you understand if I were sitting here with Judy Minor, who you know is a chancellor of the Foothill De Anza district, if I was sitting with Judy, she would say the exact same thing about you. She'd say, am I supposed to talk with your HR lead? Am I supposed to talk to the CEO? Am I talking to individual managers? How is it that we do this? And I think it points to a fundamental breakdown that we have to have organic networks where academics and practitioners are organically coming together to share information. And it is incredibly important, I believe, when we look at the future of work and the way that the future of work will evolve and will move much more quickly, it's going to be much more incumbent upon those networks to be strong and organic and integrated. And I think the success that we see is that you can't solve a problem unless you know you have the problem. And I will tell you, we partner with more than 300 companies across the country, and we have the ability to sit down with CEOs to talk to them about their needs. I guarantee you every single one of them has talent acquisition as one of their top 3 priorities. Jamie Dimon at JPMC for sure would say talent acquisition top of my list. So that's incredibly important. So there's an appetite for companies to engage in this. And there is, I think, a move, whereas I would argue maybe several decades ago, companies thought of themselves as passive consumers of education. I think there's a realization that they have to be partners in this. And how is it they participate in developing the workforce that's required right now and in the future? And to me, that is encouraging. Now we got to execute against it.
One of the things that we were talking about before we came on stage and is particularly pervasive, and I mentioned, is this ability to afford to get through the programs. That we are in a day and age where the costs aren't just simply tuition. The costs are how do you support yourself when you're going to school, especially given the fact that in community colleges, especially, a number of people are working when they're going to school. How, in an urban environment where just simply the cost of living is so high, how do you manage that? How do you do that? Is there a way that linkages with employers and possibility of jobs can help that? And what should we be focusing on?
Well, I mean, particularly post-recession, this problem is really a tremendous burden on not only the incoming workforce, those in the pipeline trying to get the education they need to get a good paying job, but in large part workers in the incumbent workers who post-recession, we're told is you can get a high school diploma and that's the default to get into the workforce. Now they find themselves having their jobs eliminated, having no opportunity for promotion. And then you have these students who are coming through the system who have been told you need to get a bachelor's degree now to have a chance at an education. If I was a conspiracy theorist, I'd say that we're actively trying to continue to oppress working class families and communities of color, because before the recession we were hot to trot on increasing graduation rates in high school. We've done that. California has the highest high school graduation rates in its history. But now we moved the goalpost. 65% of jobs that are being created in California require a post-secondary credential. And who is that impacting the most? So these individuals, the working class, working poor students, are taking on tremendous amount of debt, and in some cases by proprietary schools who are leading them to careers that will never pay the wages that require to pay back that debt. So we are creating a whole class of indentured servants all over again. And you know who these students are. So to us, the answer is rethinking what it means to prepare students for the workforce, what it means to have a credential, to rethink the whole meaning of credentials in California, and this is happening across the country. As you know, you've got folks like Coursera and edX creating nano degrees. We now have a competency-based community college who's rethinking the way that we package skills and then translate them to competencies for employers. Because at the end of the day, that's what employers are looking for. And so how can we bridge that? Yes, we want to continue to promote and support individuals to get higher and higher credentials. But in the meantime, there are ways that we can package credentials in a way that's more affordable and more connected to employment opportunities that pay regional livable wages, so that we don't have to create this mountain of debt for our students. We're fortunate in California. We have the lowest debt levels for our students in certainly our public systems. But considering the cost of living in any major city in California, it's still a huge challenge.
I would agree, and I think that one of the things in the CSU system that has given impetus to our focus on across the 23 campuses and with about 450,000 students is a very determined desire to have students graduate in 4 years. We have across the CSU put into place intentional strategies to understand what have been the institutional barriers. What are the ways we have unintendedly created these barriers to students so that they could not, if they desired, graduate in 4 years. So we found, for example, roadblock classes. We found with many of our students working 1 and 2 jobs, looking at schedules, how do we create a pathway, a very determined and fixed pathway? How do we look at our policies that have unintended consequences for students? Because we know that if you can get out in 4 years with a degree, and then you're going to be better able to take that degree and parlay that into a job that you would then have funds available quicker, and so that it would avoid the debt. Now, certainly, we also recognize that many of our students are Pell eligible, which means that they qualify for financial aid, but they are part of a community and family structure that they're oftentimes having to support and work with parents and everyone in the household to make ends meet because of what was referred in terms of the cost of living. And I think that what we have to do is to continue to work with stakeholders across California. When we as public institutions, we are connecting with legislators. I think there is sometimes a disconnect between the companies, the businesses, the organizations that say we want more employees, but then what is the role of these stakeholders in working with public institutions as we connect with the legislature? I would just say that one of the things that we're most proud of at Cal Poly Pomona is our social mobility index. And this measures the students coming in low income and looks at their economic progress over a period of time. And we were number 6 in the country last year. We've moved up to number 3 this year. And we are intending to stay very focused to work with our students around understanding the world beyond the university. I think part of the challenge is that there is an institutional higher education culture that businesses, organizations don't understand, and those of us in the institutions don't understand the business organizational culture. So I think this idea of bridging and coming together and helping us to sort out how do we provide students with the information and the access, because if we're first generation in college, you're going to be first generation in the professions. And what happens is what we've done to help you succeed within the college is not necessarily going to be there for you once you graduate. And so we've decided that it is our responsibility to provide you with an orientation, with an awareness of navigating a very different culture once you leave higher education. But I think we have to, as mentioned, we have to come to the table and be partners around a shared, around this shared goal. And I think that I know the work that is going on in the community college, the work that's going in the CSU is very much tied to elevating students' economic standing and status, because it elevates not only the students individual, but it elevates the family and the community and ultimately the region.
And I'm going to preface my remarks by saying I think it is incredibly important that everybody have a lifelong learning posture. In skill acquisition, I mean, we all have to acquire skills for the rest of our lives, and that inevitably leads to certificates and to degrees. What I would say, to borrow from the private sector, I think we've got two issues we need to grapple with as a society. One is thinking about speed to market, thinking about talent, how quickly we can get talent to the marketplace, and what is the minimum viable product to be able to be a worker at any of these companies that we're talking about. Because I would argue that right now we have a massive signaling problem that exists within our labor market. And a lot of that comes from the private sector. If I look at a job description, and I'm guilty of this as well, that I will sometimes, you look at a job description, you'll see 25 different things that are required. But if you actually sat down with the hiring manager and said, what are you really looking for?
Exactly.
I need these 3 things. It's like, okay, great, I can deal with those 3 things, but there's all this noise. Now, that works maybe, arguably, with a small number of jobs, but if you take that over the 7 million jobs that are vacant in the country right now, you've got a massive signaling problem that's incredibly difficult for educators to respond to. So we have to utilize big data and artificial intelligence to be able to make sense of that data, so there's much more precision. Because I think part of the student debt problem is that you've got young people, in our case we work with Opportunity Youth, who are meandering. They're like, well, I'm supposed to be going to school. I'm not sure where exactly it's leading to. I don't know what the path looks like. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And while they're doing that, they're accumulating debt, and they are actually closing off options for their future. And our job should be to create as many options for them as possible. So I think we have an obligation to clear out the noise in the marketplace so that there's clear pathways, clearly articulated pathways that are well understood for young people to get to jobs as quickly as possible. And then they will consume education in smaller bites. They will continue their work. And that's how I think our workforce will grow.
Can I just also add one thing that you've mentioned that I really want to reiterate? I was just seeing a statistic the other day that I think some of the top venture capitalist firms, they draw 50% or more of their talent from Harvard and Stanford. So part of what companies have got to do is to begin to really refine and define what they're looking for, but also have a Geiger counter for talent. I think that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And so what we have not done, it in some ways is going to require companies to be very clear about those competencies which our students will reflect and demonstrate, but because we're actually foreign languages. Mm-hmm. And I think that what we're looking at within university is how to help students. If you're a history major and you're passionate about history, I want you to major in history. But what we have as a responsibility, I believe, as a university, is to help translate what you've achieved as a result of majoring in history that is tied to what employers are looking for. So you've learned trend analysis, you've learned a number of skills, but we don't help you look beyond going across the stage. And I think that's part of our responsibility in higher education to take this on. So I've said, for example, at Poly Pomona, we're going to stay with our students 1 year after they graduate. because, you know, I'm like a mama bear. And I want to make sure we launch them. And what we're doing is actually bringing the experiences from the social sciences, from environmental design, from engineering, and bringing it in the interplay, in the mix, so that our students benefit by working with an engineering student. A history major can be part of our Rose Float, and it is the building of the Rose Float. So they learn techniques that they would not learn in general. I think what the community college is doing in terms of reaching out to companies and organizations is going to help also create that pathway for us. And we need to do more in the 4-year to work with the community colleges in this issue.
Can I add one data point that just reinforces that notion? There's a report out, it's called Dismissed by Degrees, which was done by Accenture and Harvard Business School. And to give you a sense of some of the distortions that occur in the labor market, you can take different job categories. There's one production supervisor job category. When you look across all the job openings in the country, 61% of those jobs require a 4-year degree for this role. The researchers went and asked all these companies, okay, tell me about the people who are in the job right now. Only 16% had a 4-year degree. So you think about the distortions. I think that, what we're trying to do when we're hiring is we're de-risking hiring. We look for overly blunt proxies. And when we rely on overly blunt proxies, we create inefficiencies and distortions of the labor market. And so how do we get rid of those? And that's by the own admission of the private sector, right? So it's just a good example of that.
And I think what I'd like to do at this point is that we've talked about the communication with the private sector, but at the same time you have communication with the students. How is it particularly that you educate the students on their different options, especially when there are these distortions? And it really is a significant issue, both in terms of paying off debt if it's accumulated, looking at career prospects, looking at where things are viable, is that how do we communicate what students can expect from putting their time and resources into a degree or a credential and directing them to where it leads them, not only in terms of what their aspirations are, but quite honestly, where they can get a job that's going to pay well, and knowing that they don't necessarily need a 4-year degree. They need a credential in many cases that they can, if they do get a 4-year degree, that they need that a specific major or a specific field is going to lead to a much higher likelihood of happiness and success. I mean, we're at the point right now where there is a certain amount of disdain for certain majors in colleges because people cannot associate a philosophy degree with a high-paying job. It doesn't matter that there might actually be, a direct correlation in AI. There might be direct correlation in certain kinds of disciplines where it could be incredibly useful. But the students don't know where that connection is, and if they don't know where that connection is, then how are the employers supposed to reach the students? So what do we do about that?
Well, I think a lot that's been said is key here. We have to move away from just talking about the blunt proxy, which is the degree, and really focus on the competencies that are learned not only in university or in college, but in the workforce, in life. We have to do a much better job of capturing skills and competencies and being able to communicate those as a package of learning. And then we have to get away from this notion that it's one and done. You get your degree and you're done. Those days are over. Community colleges have a lot of people with bachelor's degrees coming back to reskill or to upskill. Mm-hmm. There is a continuum of education now. We need to relook at that and recommunicate this to our young people and to those that are in the workforce. It's not about just going to a college or a university, getting your education, and then moving on. It is about how do you begin to learn and capture and communicate skills and competencies that you are earning through your experiences, including going to college, and then how do we as educators do a better job of communicating that to employers? And so that is the crux of the issue right now. How do we break down the competencies? How do we communicate that to employers? And how do we help students, and really all Californians, all Americans understand how the future of work is going to be impacting the way that they have to continuously reskill themselves.
Yeah, and I think that for us, it actually starts the moment you step foot on Cal Poly Pomona's campus. We have, across all of the 8 colleges, the faculty have come together and we've defined the 8 elements of a polytechnic education, an inclusive polytechnic education. These 8 elements are not ascribed to a particular major. But what we've said is, and you see on the slide, the 8 elements. And what we're recognizing is that our students, and I think the point that's just been made, this is an experience for students that they are looking to us to help them navigate. We say, you know, welcome to higher education. There are 80 majors you can choose from. There are 3,000 courses you can take. Now figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And it is, and these are individuals, again, many of them first generation. And so what we have to do is, whether or not we are a polytechnic or a liberal arts university, I think we have to help students, first of all, see their strengths. One of the things that we're very much focused on, when you come on the campus, you're not coming an empty vessel. You bring strengths and talents and predispositions and things that you're interested in. We want to find ways to cultivate that. And then we want to give you projects and activities that you're going to need to be reflective on in terms of what did you learn, how does this connect with what we're expecting. And so while the majors will continue to be very important relative to the depth of knowledge in a particular area, we want a broader context around the learning that our students are expected to achieve. And so when we have a number of students who change majors. They come in, because we said, first year, what are you going to major in? And you've got this potpourri of majors. We have not established, and this is what we're beginning to work on, this major leads you in acquiring these kinds of skills and knowledge and competencies. We've not educated them about the majors, and then how these majors, while they are not a direct connection to the world beyond, you're going to develop strengths and skills and talents. But what is more important is that we want you to work in interdisciplinary ways. And so we're beginning to do cluster hiring. We're hiring faculty. 3 faculty have hired intentionally to be able to start working with students in these interdisciplinary fashion. We are creating, we have an innovation lab, and we are expanding this opportunity for students to acquire the confidence. Because one of the things you're going to need to have is not only the knowledge, but you're going to have a mindset of resiliency. The disruption of work is going to be so fast that unless you have confidence and resiliency, you're apt to not see your place in this flow. And I think that that's part of what we can do within higher education. I think the other thing that is going to be critical for our students is to understand failing. So our students are involved in innovative labs, and they'll come at the end of the year and make their presentations. And one of the questions I will ask the groups is, tell me how you failed. Because I want you to understand that it's not going to be a direct line, that you're going to have detours. You're going, and so let's not wear the failure. Let's understand what we've learned from the failure and now move forward. Working with, we put students, and Northrop Grumman has been one of the companies that we have a wonderful partnership with, as well as Boeing and many of the others. And what we've understood is that they have started clustering people with different backgrounds, because that's become a way to create a product that is much more inclusive of the way people want to access and use. And so I think that in higher education, this is a major cultural shift for higher education. Because we have, for the most part, we've been a closed system. It's like, okay, leave us alone. We're we're doing fine. We're educating. And then you figure out once they leave. But no, I think we have, and I think as mentioned earlier, when you look at the demographics of the folks who are queuing up, in order to be able to take advantage of this, we have got to work in partnership. This is not one of those things where we can just stay in silos. And so I think this is the new era for higher education.
You've both mentioned life experiences and grit determination. There's an interesting campaign out there called Grads of Life, which is trying to highlight the experiences that people have built up through their life experiences that really translate into the workforce, in trying to highlight that in both for the young people, in our case, who have those skills, and for employers who are looking for those skills. To the question about how do you speak to students, the inconvenient truth is it's hard. It takes time and it takes resources to do it. It's difficult to imagine something that you haven't seen before. It's possible, but it's hard to do. And so much of what we have to do is expose, and again, in our work, young people to what those possibilities are. I think virtual reality has a unique role to play, potentially, in exposure. The way that we do it is really on the ground, a lot of hard work of mentors. We bring in guest speakers. We embed within community colleges, so we partner with community colleges. We're embedded within their campuses. Students are meeting the managers of the employer partners. They are going to internships. And there's a lot of heavy lifting to do that. But if I think about it at a macro level, is that we've got a massive amount of social capital that needs to be redistributed in our country.
That's right.
Right, so if you think about the networks and the strongest networks that exist in our country, that social capital needs to be distributed more equally within our country. And when that happens, then I think young people have an exposure and an attachment to say that I can get to that place. And that's the hard work that our country needs to do. And the good news about that is we partner with LinkedIn. Jeff Weiner will tell you that that's one of their initiatives, is how do they distribute that social capital so it's not a self-referential network, but one that expands to more people. So I think there's a lot of work on the ground, like a political campaign. You have to be working with a young person to connect them to as many of those opportunities as possible. And then while you're thinking about that, how do you extend your network? And a call to action would be, have you extended your network to someone in the last month? And really think about that. Have you extended your network to any people in the last month? And I would challenge you to think about a goal that you have for yourself to do that.
And in fact, one of the things I was going to just add that
very quickly, because we are over time.
That one of the biggest benefits that our students have had is the 500-600 alums who signed up on LinkedIn. Because that now a mentoring relationship is being established. Yeah.
And the connections to alumni is something that the UCs, the CSUs, the community colleges have really not historically thought about, but have been, and making advantage of those connections and trying to, in fact, that there are those networks, and it gives people a chance to redistribute social capital and be connected in ways they might not have otherwise. Given the fact that we are over time, given the fact that we are only halfway through the list of questions I have, I'd say it's been a very thorough panel. So I would like to thank each of our great panelists and thank all of you, and we'll have a short break.